They say silence can heal a man. I used to believe that. After the war, I went up the mountain with nothing but a cracked rifle, a sack of beans, and a ghost behind each eye. I built the cabin with my hands, splinters and all, and told myself I'd never owe another soul a damned thing. That was before she came, before the knock. It was a hard storm that night. One of those sideways blizzards that turns pine into spears and wind into screams. I was feeding the fire and minding my quiet when I heard it. A knock. Not a scrape, not a howl. A knock. I froze. Nobody knocked this far out unless it was death itself. I grabbed the rifle, kept the safety off, and opened the door slow. She nearly fell in. A young woman, barefoot, hair soaked to the skull, with a wild look in her eyes. Pregnant. Very. Her face was scratched, cheeks red raw from the cold, and in her hand she held a knife, still slick with blood. "Please," she said. One word. No breath left to say another. I didn't speak. I just stepped aside. She stumbled in, dropped the knife, and collapsed by the fire like she'd belonged there her whole life. Her name was June. For the first hour, I didn't ask her a damn thing. I heated broth. She didn't touch it. I handed her dry socks. She put 'em on like she was in a dream. Only when I set a blanket around her shoulders did she speak again. I didn't kill him, but I might have if I had the chance. I said nothing. That wasn't because I didn't care. It was because I knew what it meant to be hunted by memory. I'd shot men who never drew their guns, and I'd buried friends who only wanted to go home. The fire crackled, loud in the silence. After a while, she leaned back, her eyes fluttering. "They'll be coming." "Who?" "My husband's brothers," she said, eyes closed now. "They think they own me." A pause. "And the child, too." I stared at her a long time. There was something about the way she said it, like a warning, not a plea. "Why here?" I asked. She didn't open her eyes. "I heard you don't let anyone in." That made me laugh. It had been years since I'd heard my own laugh. Sounded like gravel and regret. "Guess you heard right." I muttered. I let her sleep near the fire. I kept my rifle across my lap and didn't close my eyes all night. Funny thing was, I didn't feel afraid. I felt needed. And I hated how much I liked that feeling. The snow didn't let up for 3 days. It buried the pines. It sealed the road like a coffin lid. But inside the cabin, things were quieter than they'd ever been. June barely spoke, but you watched everything. Her eyes didn't miss a move I made, how I split kindling with my boot, how I cooked without measuring, how I rubbed the barrel of my rifle like it was the only friend I had left. She'd watch and then look away, like storing every habit in a vault. I didn't push her. I knew better. She kept the knife under her pillow, even after the blood had dried. Every night she'd run her hand over her belly like she was trying to remind herself she was still here, still carrying something that mattered. On the 4th morning, I was out checking the trap line when I saw the tracks, fresh, too wide for a deer, too clean for a bear. 4 horses, headed straight toward the ridge. I came back quicker than I should have. My knee barked with every step. War injury.
Shrapnel. Never healed right. But I didn't stop moving until I slammed the cabin door behind me. She was by the fire, hands shaking as she folded up one of my old shirts. Her belly looked bigger today, like the baby had decided to grow all at once. "June," I said, "who knows you're here?" She didn't answer. Tracks in the snow. Horses. Still nothing. I crossed the room, crouched beside her. "Look, if someone's coming for you, I need to know how many and how soon." That's when she said it, flat, like reading a death notice. 3 brothers, maybe 4. One of them's named Thomas. He's the worst. I waited. He's the one who gave me to the others after my husband died. Call it inheritance. She looked at me then. Her face wasn't afraid. It was done, like a fire that it burned out and turned to ash. "You ever shoot a man in the stomach?" she asked. I nodded once. "Good," she said. "Then you'll know where to aim." That night, I reinforced the cabin, dug out the old slats I'd nailed up during the winter of '62, barred the windows, loaded the Winchester, found the Colt I hadn't touched in years, and cleaned it till the barrel gleamed like a mirror. I didn't ask if she wanted to run. I knew she couldn't, not in her condition, and I wasn't about to leave her. She sat at the table while I worked, sipping broth like it was penance. Her eyes followed me, quiet and steady. "You think they'll kill me?" she asked. "Not if I can help it." She smiled, just barely. "What about you? Why are you really up here?" I stared into the fire for a while before answering. "I got tired of burying people." She nodded, like she understood exactly what I meant. The wind picked up outside, howling like a warning. "Won't be long now," she said. And I knew she wasn't talking about the weather.
They came at dawn. 4 riders. Long coats, low hats, and guns worn like second skins. The kind of men who didn't ask, didn't blink, didn't think twice. I saw them first through the slats in the window. They didn't rush. They just sat there on their horses, staring at the cabin like they were reading a gravestone. June stood behind me, one hand braced on her belly. She didn't shake, didn't cry, just waited. "You recognize any of them?" I asked. She looked for a long moment, then nodded. "Thomas. He's the one in the black coat." He looked the part. Too clean, too calm, a snake in Sunday clothes. I stepped outside before they could call out. "Morning," I said. Thomas tipped his hat. "Mighty bold of you, friend, harboring stolen property." I didn't reply. He pointed to the cabin. "That woman in there don't belong to you. That's family business. You hand her over, and we'll be on our way." I let the words hang like smoke. "She's not a mule, Thomas. She doesn't belong to anybody." The other men shifted in their saddles. One of them spit into the snow. Another loosened his holster. Thomas smiled thin. "You really want to die for her?" "She already did. She just hadn't stopped breathing yet." That was the moment the smile left his face. "You got till sundown." He turned his horse and rode off without waiting for an answer. The others followed. I went back inside. June didn't say anything, just sat down and picked up her knife, running her thumb along the handle like it was a worry stone. "Why didn't they just try to take me?" she asked. "They're cowards, or they want you to suffer first." She nodded like she already knew. Sundown came fast. They returned with 2 more riders this time, 6 in total. I'd already loaded every weapon in the house, pushed the table up against the door. June stayed low in the back room, eyes fixed on the back exit I'd shown her. They started with a warning shot, just to rattle the windows. Didn't work. I fired back and hit one of them in the shoulder. He dropped off his horse and screamed into the dirt. Another one tried to flank around the cabin and caught a slug in the thigh. They didn't expect fight. They expected fear. I gave them blood instead. But they kept coming. Rounds hit the cabin walls like thunder. Wood splintered. One round missed my head by an inch. Then I heard the sound I didn't expect. A whistle. High, sharp, familiar. El-Ray. I hadn't seen him in years, but that whistle was ours. From the war, a signal for flanking. Through the trees came 3 horses and 2 men I thought I'd buried in memory. El-Ray, riding low and fast with Jed right behind him, rifle already firing. The outlaws scattered like leaves. I took the last one down with a shot through the boot that knocked him flat. Then the silence came, and I realized I wasn't alone anymore. June stepped out from the back, knife still in hand. She looked at the scene, the bodies, the men on the ground moaning, and said nothing. She didn't have to. We'd won the first stand. But war doesn't end in one battle.
The night after the shootout, the forest went quiet in that strange way it does after blood's been spilled, like even the owls were holding their breath. We buried the 2 who didn't make it, one of theirs, one ours. Jed took a good shot, bled out by the fire before we could do a damn thing. El-Ray didn't cry, but I saw him press Jed's old harmonica into the snow like it was a prayer. June didn't come out for hours, stayed curled in the back, wrapped in every blanket I had. When she finally emerged, her face was waxy pale. "Something's wrong," she said, voice flat. I got her into the chair by the fire, and she gripped my wrist so hard I thought she might snap it. Then her water broke. I've fought Comanches, dodged Gatling fire, and seen men claw their own guts trying to hold 'em in, but I've never been so scared in my life. June gritted her teeth, sweat pouring down her face, and said through clenched jaws, "If you faint, I'll shoot you." El-Ray blinked. "She's serious." "I know," I muttered. There was no time to run for help. No midwife, no doctor, just me, her, a pile of towels, and the worst timing God could invent. Contractions came fast, too fast. I barely had time to boil water before she was screaming into the furs. I'd never delivered a baby, never seen it done outside of a battlefield scream, but I learned fast. June bled a lot, too much. And when the baby crowned, I thought she was going to pass out right there. "Don't you leave," I said, pressing her shoulder down. "You stay." She locked eyes with me. "I didn't survive Thomas just to die in your cabin," she growled. That girl fought like fire. And in the pitch-black middle of the night, slick with sweat and pain and fury, she brought that baby into the world with a final scream that made the trees shake. A boy, pink and howling. I wrapped him in my old Union jacket, the same one I swore I'd never wear again. When I handed him to her, her arms trembled. She looked down at him like she was afraid he might vanish if she blinked. "What's his name?" I asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "Eli." The baby calmed as soon as he touched her chest, like he knew he was home. We stayed like that till morning, just the 3 of us. Me, the runaway mother, and the boy wrapped in war. I sat by the door all night, rifle in hand, listening for hooves in the snow, but none came. I wondered, not for the first time, if God had sent her here, if that knock wasn't just the sound of trouble, but of purpose. Because for the first time in years, I felt alive. Not just breathing, alive. The snow began to melt, slow and thick like molasses rolling off the roof. Trees we hadn't seen in weeks came back into view. The wind lost its bite, and Eli grew, louder, heavier, always hungry. June moved like she'd lived here her whole life, chopping herbs for stew, hanging linens on the porch, humming under her breath. She smiled more, but it was the kind of smile you had to earn, tired, thin, and full of history. Elray stayed on a few days longer, helped patch the cabin, fix the roof, dig deeper trenches. Then it tipped his hat one morning and rode off, no goodbye needed. Men like us didn't waste words. But just when the quiet started feeling like a future instead of a fluke, trouble came riding again. Elray returned 2 weeks later, face like stone. He didn't even get off his horse. "You need to hear this," he said. "They put a warrant out on you." I felt my stomach go cold. "What for?" "Desertion," he said, "and murder." I laughed, but it came out bitter. "That war's over." "Not to them," he said. "You disappeared after Black Hollow. They say you shot your own lieutenant and vanished." I looked at June, then back at Elray. "That ain't how it happened." He nodded. "I know, but paper don't care about the truth." June stood up from the porch, one hand on Eli, the other gripping the frame. "So, what happens now?" Elray looked pained. "They're sending marshals. Real ones, not bounty hunters. You stay here, they'll smoke you out." June didn't flinch. She just said, "Then we leave." That hit me harder than I expected. I'd built this cabin from nothing. Every board soaked in sweat and grief. It had been my grave, my church, my hiding place. But June was right. You can't raise the child in a cage, even if the cage is quiet. We packed what we could, a sack of flour, dried meat, the pistol and rifle, Eli's blanket. June tucked the knife into her boot like always. We left before sunup, riding double on the old mule I'd sworn was too dumb to die. He proved me wrong. For weeks we stayed off the trails, moving through ravines and game trails only the deer knew. At night we took turns sleeping. I'd wake to June holding Eli close, staring into the dark like she could hear the marshals coming through the trees. One night I caught her crying. She didn't sob, just sat there, tears running down her face, silent as the moon. "I'm sorry," she said, voice tight. "I didn't mean for you to lose your life." I reached out and took her hand. "I didn't lose it. I gave it to something better." She didn't answer, but she didn't let go either.
We found a hollowed-out hunting shack near the Idaho line, half buried under pine needles and thyme. It wasn't much, but it gave us shelter. June patched it up with wool blankets and dry moss. Eli slept curled against her, tiny fists clenched like he was still fighting for space in this world. I'd just started to believe we might have bought ourselves some time. Then came the gunshot. Sharp, sudden, echoing through the trees like a thunderclap. I hit the dirt before instinct even registered. June screamed. Eli wailed. Another shot split the air, closer. "Run!" I shouted. "Out the back, like we planned." She didn't argue. She scooped up Eli and vanished through the low tunnel we dug under the rear wall, a path hidden by brambles. I grabbed the rifle and slipped out the front. Marshals. 3 of them with lawman badges and clean saddles. Not bounty hunters, federal. They didn't give me a chance. The first one winged my shoulder, spun me. I landed hard. The second cracked me in the ribs with the butt of his carbine.
Next thing I knew, I was face down in the snow, arms bound, blood soaking into my coat. "Samuel Barlow, you got quite the trail of bodies behind you." He rolled me over with his boot, wore a smirk under his mustache like he'd been waiting years for this moment. "I'm U.S. Marshal Carroll. You're under arrest for desertion, murder, and unlawful flight." I didn't say a word, just watched his face for any hint of mercy. Found none. They dragged me to their camp a mile out, tied me to a pine like a dog, hands numb, shoulder on fire. "Thought you could play house out here," Carroll sneered. "Shoulda known better." They talked about June around the fire like she was nothing, called her names, laughed about splitting the bounty. That was when I decided I'd die trying before I let 'em find her again. By morning, I was half frozen and coughing blood. Then came a sound I didn't expect. Hooves. Fast. Close. I heard shouting. A rifle cracked. Then another. One marshal screamed. And through the trees came June, riding Elray's old mule, fire in her eyes and a pistol in both hands. She wasn't alone. Elray rode behind her, firing as he came. Between the two of them, it was over in less than a minute. 2 marshals dead, Carroll crawled into the brush, bleeding from his thigh. June dismounted before the dust settled. She ran to me, cut the rope with her boot knife, and pressed her forehead to my phone. "I told you not to faint," she whispered. I laughed, couldn't help it. They'd come for me. She had come for me. For the first time in my life, I knew what it meant to be saved, not by a country, not by a cause, but by someone who chose me.
We didn't stop riding for 3 days. My shoulder screamed every time the mule shifted, but I held tight to June and Eli like they were the only things keeping me alive. Maybe they were. We moved northeast into country so thick with pines you couldn't hear your own footsteps. Elray knew the routes smugglers and deserters used after the war, paths no lawman would find unless he was born there. We followed those. On the 4th day, we found an abandoned miner's cabin buried in moss and ivy, the roof half caved in but standing. It was a good hiding place, almost peaceful. For a while, we made it home. We smoked meat, caught rainwater. June hung strips of fabric over the windows and taught Eli how to smile with just a fingertip to his nose. He was growing fast, getting heavier, strong lungs too. At night, when the wind wasn't howling, we talked about anything and nothing. I told her about my brother who died at Antietam, about the way my mother used to braid rope so tight you couldn't tear it. She told me about books she read by candlelight and how she always imagined naming a girl Lucy. We never spoke about going back. We knew there was no back. Then came the preacher. He showed up one morning walking out of the mist like a ghost in black. Tall man, lean, carried a Bible in one hand, a pistol in the other. Said his name was Coyle, used to be a man of God, now just a messenger. I rode with Marshal Carroll's second wave, saw the camp, the blood. They ain't coming back quiet next time. "What do you want?" I asked. "To offer you a choice," he said, kneeling to stir the fire like he owned it. "Keep running or make a stand." June stepped forward, Eli in her arms. "We're tired," she said. He looked at her like he knew, like he saw every mile in her bones. Then he pulled something from his coat, a folded poster, my face on it,
inked in bold, wanted. The bounty's gone up. They say you're leading a rebellion now. I laughed. Me? A rebellion? Don't matter what's true, only what men believe. We sat in silence after he left. Later that night, June turned to me by the fire. "We can't keep running," she said. "I know. They'll chase Eli next, even if we're long gone. I know that too." She looked at me, eyes burning. "And let's give 'em something to chase." We spent the next days gathering everything we had, reinforcing the cabin, digging escape tunnels, teaching each other how to load, reload, shoot, hide, not just to survive, but to be remembered. If they were gonna call us outlaws, we'd show 'em what that meant.
They came at dawn, just like before, but this time we were ready. From the ridge we saw the dust before we heard the hooves, 15 riders, maybe more, uniformed, grim-faced, the kind of men who thought a badge gave 'em God's authority. At the front rode a new marshal, clean-shaven, green eyes, held his reins like he'd never fired a shot in anger. He'd learned. June and I took our positions. She kissed Eli's head once and tucked him in the hollow behind the root cellar, wrapped in every blanket we owned. Then she loaded her revolver and looked me dead in the eye. "If we die," she said, "we do it standing." "No," I told her, "we do it together." They didn't bother with negotiations. The first shot came from a rifle halfway down the slope. It missed the cabin by inches. I returned fire, caught one man square in the chest. He dropped, limp as laundry. The firefight was chaos, gunpowder smoke, cracked timber, shouts through the trees. They set fire to the front porch trying to smoke us out. But June, my God, June, moved like fury itself, from window to window, firing with precision. At one point I saw her reload with Eli's blanket still draped around her shoulders. She wasn't fighting for revenge. She was fighting for a future. Eventually they pushed too close. I flanked out the side tunnel, came up behind their line, and dropped two before they realized I wasn't in the cabin anymore. One marshal turned to shoot me, but Coyle, yes, that damned preacher, rode in from nowhere and split the man's head with an axe. Turns out even a preacher has limits to his patience. By midday, the cabin was gone, ash and cinders. But we were alive, bloodied, burned but alive. The marshals pulled back, leaving their wounded. They didn't expect a fire to fight back. We buried our weapons deep in the woods that night and crossed into Montana by morning. Elray stayed behind to scatter the trail. For a time, we were ghosts again. But life has a funny way of showing mercy when you stop begging for it. Years passed. Eli grew strong. We built a new cabin, smaller, quieter. I taught him to fish. June taught him to read. We planted roots not in the soil, but in each other. Then one spring a sheriff came riding up with a letter. He dismounted, hat in hand, and looked at me like I was made of glass. He said, "Your federal government cleared your name. Turns out your lieutenant was dirty. The charges won't stick." I took the letter, read it once, then I tossed it into the stove. June didn't ask why. We both knew. I didn't need their forgiveness. I had hers, and that was all that ever mattered. Years later, when my hair turned white and my hands stopped working right, I sat on the porch and watched Eli chase rabbits through the grass. I died in that chair one morning, coffee still warm beside me. June buried me under the oak,
And when her time came, Eli did the same for her. No headstones, no sermons, just peace. And a cabin with a door that never stayed closed again.